After losing out on Trill Williams, the Saints bring back another undrafted free agent and friend of the podcast. Then we dive into offensive personnel groupings and how the Saints utilized them in 2020. And we wrap up with a look at PFF's projections for the New Orleans Saints starting lineup, all on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode here at Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, here every single Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, covering your New Orleans Saints. On today's episode, some news and notes for you. Eric Burrell is back, but another undrafted free agent is out in an interesting turn of events, and Saints salary cap updates. Then midweek fundamentals is back. Last week we talked defensive schemes. Now let's talk about offensive personnel groupings, 11 personnel, 12, 21, 22. We'll take a look at them all and which ones the Saints used most in 2020. And we'll wrap up with a look at PFF, who took a moment to predict the Saints 2021 NFL starting lineup. So we'll take a look at what might change between here and the beginning of the season. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Deputy Brand Manager with Canal Street Chronicles, and your Tuesday co-host over at the National Locked On NFL podcast. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints, your team every day. All right, family, as we get started on today's episode of Locked On Saints, don't forget to check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL show as well, one of our flagship shows here on the Locked On Podcast Network, to get the national perspective of everything going on across the NFL. I'm sure they're going to be talking about, I'm going to call him a hometown hero. I know he's from Ohio, but hey, Joe Burrow, hometown hero for the state of Louisiana, right, is expected to be back at training camp and ready to go, or really expected to be back for the beginning of the season for the Cincinnati Bengals. Talking all about that over on Peacock and Williamson this morning, as well as on the Locked On Today podcast. Now, if you want to talk a little bit more about the New Orleans Saints, of course, you're at the right place, but also want to remind everybody that's listening on the podcast that we are available on YouTube as well. And if you're on YouTube watching and you want to take us on the go, we're available on your favorite podcast apps as well. Just search Locked On Saints on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so some news and notes for today. Just a couple of days after missing out on Trill Williams, remember that whole situation we talked about yesterday? The Saints apparently had a deal in place to re-sign him and bring him back, but he was claimed last second off of waivers by the Miami Dolphins. So Trill Williams is now a Miami Dolphin, but the player that they ended up waiving with a failed physical designation with him, Eric Burrell, who you heard on the show twice last week on the Wednesday and Friday episodes, if you want to go back and listen or watch those to hear and learn a little bit more about the safety out of Wisconsin. He is now back. The Saints re-signed him. It was on the NFL transaction wire at the end of the day on on Tuesday. So great news for Eric Burrell and a good move by the New Orleans Saints, because they might be looking for some additional special teamers to come in and maybe challenge for the role that Justin Hardy once held, who's now, of course, with the New York Jets. Could Eric Burrell be that guy? He was phenomenal on special teams for Wisconsin, and it's something that he takes very much care of in terms of the level of his game and what he wants to play. He talked about that with us on the Wednesday episode last week. Now, at the same time, though, there was this other sort of confusing situation that happened with an undrafted free agent for the New Orleans Saints officially retiring from the NFL. That was Alex Hoffman, the Carroll College offensive lineman that the Saints brought in as an undrafted free agent just weeks after being signed post-draft, has now officially retired because he got accepted to med school. So he decided he wanted to prioritize life in medicine over life in the NFL. And honestly, especially at times like right now, what a great choice, right? What an awesome choice for him to make and say, nah, got into med school. I'm going to go dedicate my life to making people better. I love that so much. So shout out to Alex Hoffman when you're short-lived, but I hope still feels very much accomplished career getting into the NFL at all, which most people in life, of course, will never, ever experience. And now he gets to go to med school and potentially save lives, another something that maybe other folks will never, ever experience. So pretty incredible stuff for Alex Hoffman there, and we shout out to him. And finally, another big update here. The New Orleans Saints salary cap was released by Albert Breer this morning. $374,000 of salary cap space for the New Orleans Saints. But you know what? They're going to work magic with it, right? If you look back at the beginning of the season last year, it was Kansas City who had like $3 in the bank when they, extended Chris Jones and gave Patrick Mahomes this massive contract and everything. And the Saints could potentially do something very similar to that. Not a 10-year quarterback contract by any means, but still with just $374,000 estimated in their total salary cap right now, which is at the bottom 32nd, should be 33rd at this point in the NFL. They still have the ability to make some huge moves and create some salary cap space for themselves at the same time. Remember, the Saints have 3 moves available to them. And of course, it's not just their decision to make, right? These do factor into 2 sides, negotiations, all these other things. But there are 3 moves that the Saints could potentially make between now and the beginning of the season, maybe even into the season, that not only free them up more salary cap space for a successful move now, but also shore up players at important positions for their future. One of those names, of course, is Ryan Ramczyk, who's in his 5th-year option and is due for an extension. If the Saints were to work out an extension with Ryan Ramczyk, they could free up somewhere between $3 to $7 million or so, depending upon how they structure the first year of his deal, and get him a 4, 5, 6-year contract that keeps him in New Orleans for the foreseeable future, of course, with certain tricks and things like that built into the contract, as it could escalate a bit more once you got into the 2023-2024 seasons, where you expect to see the salary cap skyrocket. Same thing with Marcus Williams, and to an extent, the same thing with Marshawn Lattimore, though because of Marshawn Lattimore's offseason arrest, that might complicate things a little bit, and the Saints might not be in a hurry to make that decision with him. But with with Marcus Williams and with Ryan Ramczyk, those are 2 solid ways to shore up your future at very important positions, and also free yourself up some cash to spend right now, especially if you're still interested in bringing in a veteran corner. Which, of course, is something we'll talk about a little bit later as we continue to go through today's episode and we look at Pro Football Focus, who took the time to project the Saints' 2021 starting lineup on both the offensive and defensive side with the roster that they have right now. There's a lot of conversation going on around the cornerback position, so we'll revisit that a little bit later on. But that would certainly be ways to free up some funds to be able to make such a move and get that veteran cornerback in the building, if that's still the route that they want to go, after they've gotten a little bit of time here with Paulson Adebo over rookie minicamps and with OTAs right around the corner. Now, the timeline for those moves really comes down to need. Do they feel like they need to get those moves done quickly so that they can go out there and sign somebody else? Then obviously that would expedite the situation. Otherwise, the Saints typically don't rush these moves and tend to get them done right as training camp begins, when people show up at the facility and can physically sign their extension or their contract. So we'll see exactly what goes on with all that. But what you can't expedite is the learning process of football. That's why we've instituted midweek fundamentals. Last week, we talked defensive schemes. This week, we're talking offensive personnel groupings. We'll talk about the 4 that the Saints used the most in 2021, one that I could expect to see them potentially use more in 2021. Sorry, which ones they used most in 2020, which one they might want to use more in 2021. And we'll take a look at how they produced in each one. So we'll take a look at all of that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And hey, Saints fans, listen up. Nugenix, the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC, is offering a complimentary bottle of their product to all football fans in America. All that you have to do to get that complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T is text DRAFT, DRAFT, to the number 231231. Now, this is a unique man-boosting formula that's powered by Testofen, which helps to boost free testosterone and total testosterone levels and increase energy and lean muscle mass. Look at all this lean muscle over here. You see what I'm saying? And so if I want that, all I have to do is text DRAFT to 231231. And if you text right now, they're going to also include a complimentary bottle of their Nugenix Thermo product as well. Most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help you get back into shape absolutely free. Again, just text DRAFT to 231231. That's DRAFT to 231231. Message and data rates may apply. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you as always for being here. If you're listening or if you're watching over on YouTube, I'm very excited about our new series here, Midweek Fundamentals, where we go through and just sort of define some of the things that we consistently talk about in football, but I kind of take for granted that not everybody knows them, especially, and there's some feedback that I've heard, some of our overseas folks that don't get to see the game as much as we do here in the US. So I'm super, super excited to be able to provide this, especially over on the YouTube side where we can provide some visual aids. Check that out. Them's be cues. That's how we do cues in the theater. All right. So with these, and even if you're listening over on the podcast, you're not going to miss out on anything. We're going to talk through these step by step, as they would say. So what you need to know about personnel groupings is that it includes a 2-digit number. So we're going to start off by talking about 11 personnel. With 11 personnel and with these 2-digit numbers, what these numbers mean is that the first digit means the number of running backs on the field. The second digit stands for the number of tight ends on the field. So 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 11 personnel. Now, there's generally 5 skill position players on the field, right? You have 11 total on the offensive side, 5 of which are generally offensive linemen, 1 of which is usually the quarterback, so that's already 6 accounted for. So you're trying to fill out the rest of the 11 with 5 skill position players. So in 11 personnel, you have 1 tight end and 1 running back. That's 2 skill position players. You subtract that from 5, and that's how you get the amount of wide receivers that are on the field. Because again, you're trying to get 5 skill position players out there along with the 6 that are already accounted for with the offensive line and quarterback. So you're looking at 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers in 11 personnel. Now, teams obviously get creative. The New Orleans Saints do this all the time, to where sometimes there's a 6th offensive lineman. Sometimes there's a 2nd quarterback when it came to the New Orleans Saints over the past few seasons. You get creative in terms of how you designate these. I tend to, because you can kind of look at them as like, all right, let's say that you've got 6 offensive linemen, you've got 1 running back, 2 tight ends, and 1 wide receiver, because you would usually be able to get a 2nd wide receiver out there, but because you have the additional offensive lineman, you're already accounting for 1 of them. They report it as eligible and they're fine. So that's still 12 personnel, right? 1 running back, 2 tight ends, but you have a 6 offensive linemen. So I would call that like 6-12. If there's 2 quarterbacks out there, then I would call it like 2-12. There's a bunch of different ways that you can go on about it and everything. But what we're going to focus on right now are just the basics. It is midweek fundamentals after all, so let's not get too complicated here. But just to sort of show you how creative you can get with this, those are some of the things you might see teams do. And 6-12, 2-12, all those things that I mentioned really just comes down to how people want to designate them. Some places just consider those still the personnel groups and count only. What's the running back count? What's the tight end count? That's all I care about. That's totally fine. That's basically the way we're going to operate today. Other folks will call them jumbo 12 if there's 6 offensive linemen there, jumbo 11 if there's 6 offensive linemen, and then only 1 running back and 1 tight end. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. It really just kind of comes down to personal preference. So let's stick with the most basic though here. We're going to start with the most utilized personnel groupings for the New Orleans Saints in the 2020 season. So we're going to start off here with 11 personnel. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it on the screen. If you're listening on the podcast, it's 1 running back, 1 tight end, and Traquan Smith in the slot with Michael Thomas and let's say Emmanuel Sanders on the outside as the bookends. That's basically what you're looking at, right? Super simple. They used this 54% of the time. This was the personnel grouping that was the most prevalent, the most utilized for them in 2020. And they were pretty successful with it, particularly in the run game. Now, let's take a look at another one. You can go a little bit heavier here to get ready for the run game as well. This was a position group that they used, or a personnel grouping, that they used 16% of the time. It's 12 personnel. So with this one, think back to last year where you would see Josh Hill and Adam Troutman on the field together. Jared Cook and Josh Hill on the field together. Adam Troutman and Jared Cook on the field together, right? 2 tight ends, 1 running back here. That's 12 personnel. And then you have your 2 outside receivers there. The Saints used this 16% of the time. And this is where they had the most success in the run game. 62% run success grade, according to Sharp Football Stats here. They averaged over 4 yards per carry in this formation, or let me not say formation. Let me just say in this personnel grouping, right? Because the formations can vary. This just tells you who's on the field, which we'll get to formations at a later episode. So now let's jump to the one that they use the third most. They use this one 14% of the time. This one is 21 personnel. So it's the reverse of 12. 12 was 1 running back, 2 tight ends. 21 is 2 running backs, 1 tight end. So think about Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray on the field together. Alvin Kamara and last year Michael Burton on the field together, for instance, with 1 tight end over on, in line or lined up wherever they're lined up, and then the 2 wide receivers over on the outside. This was a really interesting one because despite the fact that this is usually a heavy run set, right? You usually see teams run mostly out of this with 2 running backs on the field. The Saints were actually most successful in the passing game in this personnel group. 65% success rate in the passing game, according to Sharp Football Stats. And then finally, we're going to go full on just big man right here. 22 personnel. This means 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. This is Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray in the backfield. This is Alvin Kamara, Michael Burton in the backfield with 2 tight ends on either side of the offensive line and a wide receiver split out wide. The Saints use this 6% of the time, their 4th most used, and there's a bunch of like 3%, 1%, 2% that continue on as well. So 6% here, the amount of times that they ran, or the percentage which they ran this personnel group. Now, one group that I believe I could see the Saints utilizing a little bit more in 2021 is called 10 personnel. Now, this sounds weird, and I honestly wasn't sure if I should talk about this or not because it might make me sound crazy, but it's fine. I'm happy to sound crazy every now and then. This is 1 running back, no tight ends, 4 wide receivers, right? So your 5 skill position players are a running back and 4 wide receivers. The reason why I'm intrigued by this personnel grouping for the Saints, they only used it 3% of the time last season, 33 times over the course of the entire year. I'm interested in this personnel group because considering the tight end room right now, which is massively inexperienced and unproven, let's just be honest about what it is at the moment. Adam Troutman, we expect to be very good. Nick Van Eck could bring something for the New Orleans Saints in that Josh Hill mold. Hell, even Dylan Sainer could potentially step in here as an undrafted free agent and just be fantastic and exactly what the Saints need. It's very possible. But as of right now, unproven room. So if that's the case, and if the Saints feel that way going into the 2021 season, I wouldn't be surprised to see them potentially take a little bit of a boost here from the additional wide receivers that they have in the building in the passing game. Now, the thing about this is that a 4 wide receiver set tends to threaten downfield, but it doesn't mean you have to attack downfield. You can still attack underneath. You can still use this to spread out a defense and run with Alvin Kamara against light boxes. There's just a lot of different ways that you can really utilize this and attack defenses with 4 wide receivers out there. So what I'm picturing here is Michael Thomas over on the what we'll call the weak side, which is the side without the running back. And then over on the Z side, the opposite side of the field, probably Traquan Smith, although Marquez Callaway sure could stake his claim there. And then in the slot on either side, whichever of Traquan Smith or Marquez Callaway isn't lined up on the outside, and Deontay Harris in the middle. We saw Deontay Harris line up in situations like this late in the season, similar to this late in the season, and be able to produce. So even if they don't attack all the way down the field, this still ends up creating a lot of different opportunities to utilize this look in order to do things very differently going into that 2021 season. So that's our look at the position groups, or personnel groupings rather, over on the offensive side. Up next, we're going to project forward now. We're going to take a look at the lineup that Pro Football Focus projected for the Saints 2021 season and talk about what it is that could change heading into the year between now and the beginning of the season. We have all that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, don't forget to check out our good friends over at BetOnline AG. Fastest and easiest way to place all of your bets and get in on all of your sports action. Baseball's in full swing, no pun intended, but also pun very much intended. You can also get everything going on in the NBA with the play-in having gotten underway now. And then we have the NHL, we've got UFC and MMA action going on. So get in on all of it, right? No need to sit on the sidelines anymore. Time to get in on the game. And you can do so by heading over to the website or using your mobile device to sign up today. Remember, it's free to sign up. And with the money that you put in to bet, you can also get a 50% welcome bonus simply by using the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. And this goes for your first deposit. So right after you make your account, once you put the money in to bet on, make sure you use that promo code LOCKEDON to get 50% on that first deposit. It's only going to work for the first one, so do it right away. Head over to betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. And as always, don't forget to check out our good friends as well over at builtbar.com, the best tasting protein bars on the market. Y'all already know my favorite flavor, right? I love me some mint brownie, but also love some of the fruit and chocolate ones as well, like raspberry and chocolate. That's a favorite combination of mine. And they have a ton of new flavors, limited edition flavors that pop up all the time as well. And the only way to catch those is to go to builtbar.com and check in every now and then to see what they've got going. So you can go ahead, you can head over there, you can grab your favorite flavor, you can grab a limited edition flavor, you could try something new, you can grab a sample box, whatever it is that you end up doing when you're at checkout. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, so you get 15% off of your next order. It doesn't matter if it's your first order or your next order, you get 15% off with the promo code 15. So don't forget to do that. Try them out. These bars are covered in 100% chocolate. They are high in protein, high in fiber, low in calories, low in sugar. They're fantastic. So head over to builtbar.com today. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, rate, review if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, and share with your friends, your family, all the Saints fans that you know. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. We want to take a look now going into the 2021 NFL season. So this is a really interesting one because if you're interested in projections, which we've done a bit of projecting so far on this show, right? We've talked a bit about looking ahead to what it is that, Jameis Winston could produce in a 17-game season, what Alvin Kamara may produce in a 17-game season, what the record might be, all those other things. You can get a little bit more granular. You can get a little bit more invested and take a look at what you think maybe some of these other projections could look like in the 2021 NFL season. And one of the ones that Pro Football Focus did that I think is really, really interesting is that they projected all 32 teams starting lineups. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up over on the video side for everybody to see. But again, if you're listening, you're not going to miss out on anything. We're just talking now through this projected starter list for Pro Football Focus and the New Orleans Saints, and we're going to take a look at the things that we think might change. So we'll step through all of this because there are a couple of position groups that are most interesting to me. We'll start off with cornerback 2, and it's not even a position group, it's just a position, cornerback 2, right away. They actually have Paulson Adebo listed opposite Marshawn Lattimore, but the cornerback position is probably the one with the most question marks going into the 2021 NFL season. Is Paulson Adebo going to be ready? Are the Saints going to invest in another veteran cornerback to challenge there? Is some other corner that's already on the roster going to step up and maybe claim that role from the rookie? Is Marshawn Lattimore going to be available to start off the season with his offseason arrest and the legal troubles that might come with it? So there's still so many questions over at the cornerback position. And even though Pro Football Focus listed linebacker as a position to watch over the offseason, I would argue that it's actually corner. Over on the offensive side, one of the spots that I'm really watching as well is going to be wide receiver 2. On this depth chart or on this projected starters chart, the Saints are listed with Michael Thomas over on the left side, with Traquan Smith as their starting slot receiver, with Marquez Callaway as the Z opposite Michael Thomas over on the tight end side. That's a very interesting projection. Obviously, we saw Marquez Callaway really stand out in his rookie season, coming out as an undrafted free agent from Tennessee. But how does the shift from Drew Brees to Jameis Winston and or Taysom Hill, we'll talk about more about that in a moment, how does that affect what the Saints want to do at that wide receiver position? Is it going to be Traquan Smith? Is it going to be Marquez Callaway? Could it be Kawan Baker, who they're also interested in seeing over on the outside and is a bit of a playmaker himself? There's a lot of options here for the New Orleans Saints, but they right now, Pro Football Focus, have Marquez Callaway projected, but we know very much that could change before the season gets here. Let's stick around over on the offensive side. We'll look at the offensive line right now. They've got Eric McCoy still at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard. Now, the Saints drafted Cesar Ruiz to play center, but then there was a truncated offseason last year. He also dealt with some injuries, and then half of time that he was available, and I said that right, half of time that he was available, he spent at right guard. The other half of time that he was available, he spent at center. So he just didn't really get an opportunity to really edify himself in a new position at right guard or at his natural position at center. So we'll see exactly what happens now with a full offseason ahead of them. I think you could really make the argument either way here that you move Cesar Ruiz to his natural position and you have confidence in Eric McCoy to be able to perform at the right guard position. Or you say, hey, we've already invested a season in Cesar Ruiz at the right guard spot. Eric McCoy has been outstanding at center. We're not changing anything. So either argument, I think, makes a ton of sense. We'll see exactly what it is that the Saints do there. Now we'll go to the position that PFF said is the position to watch, which is the linebacker position. Pete Werner right now as a projected starter next to Demario Davis, according to Pro Football Focus. I would take Pete Werner here. The other question mark is Zach Bond, but I think Zach Bond needs more time for the same reason we just talked about with Cesar Ruiz. Zach Bond also dealt with injuries during his training camp. It was just already truncated and he missed a ton of time, and he's changing position from defensive line to off-ball linebacker, where he really only played like less than 10 snaps at off-ball linebacker specifically during the season. So with that being the case, I think Pete Werner is the guy that comes in. We all kind of agree that he seems to be the one that's most pro-ready out of this draft class anyway. Put him out on the field, see what he brings for you. And then finally, we'll take a look at interior defensive line. Right now, the Saints are starting Shy Tuttle in this projection next to David Onyemata. That could be Shy Tuttle. That could be Malcolm Roach. That could be Jalen Dalton. That could be even a guy like Tano Passanio, who could play on the interior as well. 280, 275 pounds, plays mostly as an edge rusher, but played a ton in the interior for the Kansas City Chiefs over the past few seasons. So you could also see him rotate there as well. Lots of options for the Saints. Wouldn't be surprised to see them still go after a penetrating 3-tech pass rusher, but maybe David Onyemata is transferring into that role here going into the 2021 season. And actually, finally wrapping up here, the coup de grace, the last one, the quarterback position. I mean, look, PFF has Jameis Winston projected as the starter here ahead of 2021. I tend to agree with that. I know not everyone agrees with that, and we still have so much to see play out. We have training camp left to play out. We have the preseason, 3 preseason games to remember to watch, and I don't think the Saints are going to be in any rush to make this decision. I think the Saints will take it down to the wire, at least with the public announcement of who is going to be the starter week 1 at the quarterback position. But Jameis Winston right now has the headway, 5 years of NFL starting experience versus 4 games with Taysom Hill. That also means, though, that Taysom Hill deserves more of a look, right? Because he's only got 4 games. So he'll get that look in training camp. He'll get that look in the preseason. But the Saints will have to make the decision that they feel like is best for their team and gives their team the best winning opportunity ahead of 2021. Right now, that feels like Jameis Winston, but we'll see what we learn during camp. So that's the way we see it as we look at this projected 2021 PFF roster for the New Orleans Saints. What can change before the season gets here? Make sure you check out the Locked On Today podcast today. Again, talking Joe Burrow and many more stories around the world of sports, everything you need around the world of sports in 20 minutes, wherever you get your podcast. Coming up tomorrow, Top 3 Thursday. We've also got a look at the Saints Week 2 opponent, looking ahead to see what's changed, what's new, what's going on, and what the biggest question marks are heading into that as we continue to break down the New Orleans Saints 2021 season with early looks. And of course, I appreciate y'all as always for being here, for rating, reviewing, for liking, subscribing, commenting, everything you do to help grow this family from the bottom of my heart. I thank you so much. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them and trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.